Are you listening? Damn. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi everybody, this is Mr. Miller. We are going to do a quick review here of the material that's going to be on the first quarter quarterly. That's from 2020, 2021. And we're going to cover 4 different areas here. We're going to cover the Our Founding Documents unit, Industrialization, which was from farmers to factory unit, labor, and the historical process unit. Please pay attention. This will help you out a lot on the test. So first off, the Our Founding Documents. The ideas in the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the Northwest Ordinance came from philosophers during what period in European history? That would be the Enlightenment. Early 1600s throughout the early 1700s. According to the Declaration of Independence, what is the source of power of the government? In other words, where does the government get its authority from? That would be the people. Derived from the consent of the governed is the key phrase in the Declaration of Independence here. 3. Large states want a representation in Congress based on population, but small states want representations to be equal. And we're talking about large and small, we're not talking about territory or area necessarily, we're talking about population. What were some arguments made by the Anti-Federalists? What were some arguments made by the Federalists? Anti-Federalists were people who were against the Constitution. Federalists were people who were for the Constitution. And here's some of the arguments that they made. The Federalists said that we need a strong national defense, a standing army, national taxation to pay for everything. We need to safeguard the distributions of power and citizens' rights, and that would be done through checks and balances between the branches. Anti-Federalists, basically the opposite of everything. National taxation would be too stressful, people would not like it, they would want to rebel and revolt, and we'd have a fight on our hands within our own country. Standing army would be too stressful, it would also be expensive. A standing army is one, I should mention, that is ready to go at a moment's notice, has been trained, has been prepared, has supplies and vehicles that it needs. The Anti-Federalists said that would be too expensive, and we would constantly be trying to upkeep the Army and the Navy, so we shouldn't have it. And we can't have too much power put in one place. That would be too much like a monarchy, and even if you have distribution of powers, it's still going to be difficult to keep that one place from ruling the whole country. So that are some serious concerns on the Anti-Federalist part when it came to getting the Constitution ratified. 5. What does inalienable mean? Inalienable means cannot be given away or taken away. An inalienable right, just like right to life, liberty, and property, is the same as a natural right, like John Locke or Thomas Jefferson would have talked about. What are some problems with the Articles of Confederation, and how did the Constitution solve those problems? So this is, number 6 is connected to number 4 in a lot of ways. So problems with the Articles of Confederation. No unity. There was no unity. Infighting between the states was not uncommon. Government was broke. By broke, I mean had no money, no moolah, no dinero, no bank. And that's a big issue if you want to do anything. Raise an army, raise a navy, build roads, build hospitals, whatever, did not exist. The funds did not exist to pay for it. Government could not solve disagreements between the states. So if there was a major territorial disagreement or disagreement about law or trade or anything like that, the states, the original 13 colonies, had nowhere to go to solve those problems. So the Constitution was written to solve these issues. Solutions in the Constitution: create a president or an executive everybody could get behind. Then you could be more unified. Give Congress the power to tax. If the country is broke, if the government is broke, give Congress the power to levy and collect taxes, and then you're not relying upon the individual states to loan you money. Create a judiciary to solve arguments. The judiciary would be created to solve the arguments that were put forth by the states. And also, there would be arguments, of course, between the states and the federal government. Judiciary could solve those as well. What was the first form of government utilized by the United States? Well, that was the Articles of Confederation. I'm not talking about a monarchy under the British Empire. I'm talking about after the Revolution, what did we use? We used the Articles of Confederation until we replaced it with the Constitution. The Northwest Ordinance said, what about new states entering the Union? New states would be equal to the older states. There would be no hierarchy of states, unlike the colonies of the British Empire, who were subservient to the crown. Why did the Anti-Federalists say a Bill of Rights was needed? The Anti-Federalists said, well, we'll let the Constitution pass, we'll ratify it if you compromise. And the Federalists said, sure, great, what's the compromise? We need a Bill of Rights. The Federalists said, why do we need a Bill of Rights? Because it protects the people from too much governmental power. We have rights listed, the right to freedom of speech, freedom of petition, right to bear arms, right to trial by jury. All those things will be written down in the Bill of Rights, and the government can't just swoop in and take them away. And finally, Great Compromise of the Constitutional Convention created a what? Well, again, the largely populated states, they needed representation based on population. The smaller states, they wanted representation to be equal. And so the Great Compromise, or Connecticut Compromise, was brokered, and the upper house of the legislature would be equal representation. That's the Senate. And the lower house, the House of Representatives, would be based on population. That's the first unit. Industrialization. Here we go. Monopolies reform when tycoons eliminated competition from other businesses. If you remember back to the Farmers to Factories unit background slide, it was a political cartoon all about a monopoly gaining control of farming. What is social Darwinism? Social Darwinism is when business and corporations which can adapt to changes will survive, but those that can't go bankrupt or they go out of business entirely. This is similar to regular Darwinism or biological evolution, where organisms that can adapt and change to their environment will survive, but those that can't will go extinct. According to laissez-faire economics, what should government do in relation to business and industry? According to laissez-faire economics, government should stay out of business. Government should keep its hands off business matters. Hands off is the translation of laissez-faire. Government just tends to muck things up under this theory of economics and should not mess things, should let business do what business does. What made the production of steel cheap and efficient? This is a straight vocabulary question. It's the Bessemer process. How were Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller similar? Andrew Carnegie and John Rockefeller were both very rich tycoons. Andrew Carnegie made his money off of steel, was headquartered in Pittsburgh. John Rockefeller made his money off of oil, was headquartered in Cleveland. How are they similar? Well, they're both very rich, but they also gave a lot of money to charitable causes, so they were very philanthropic. They were philanthropists. Continuing on with question 6, what were 3 problems farmers were having in the late 1800s? This is straight from your notes. Good farming land was scarce. Crop prices were falling. Because farmers kept growing more and more crops, the price and value of the crops went down. And railroad companies were gouging farmers to transport crops. Gouging means not like the physical gouging of something, but gouging, taking away money that was needed for the farmers. For example, railroad companies knew that they were the only way that the farmers were going to transport crops from one place to another, so they raised their prices. What is the difference between rural, urban, and suburban? Rural is the country. Urban is the city. Suburban is outside of the city, but it's not in the country. It's somewhere in between the two. How fast did the Transcontinental Railroad allow people to travel across the U.S.? About 10 days time. Transcontinental Railroad was completed in 1869. It connected the West Coast to the East Coast. The Transcontinental Railroad, other places I have read said that it's shorter than even 10 days time, maybe 7 days time, and an express train could complete the journey in 3 days time. Moving on to the next section, labor. 3 reasons why labor unions would form. Labor unions are groups of people who have the same profession, who unite to protect their working rights, to make their working lives better. Why do labor unions form? A few reasons here. There's actually 4 reasons instead of 3. Low wages, long hours, dangerous working conditions, and child labor. These are reasons why labor unions would form in the late 1800s in the United States. Why do companies utilize child labor anyway? Well, children work for less money, and children are more easily intimidated. So you can take advantage of them in both of those ways. It's a good deal for the companies, not a very good deal for the kids. If wages are too low, how can you solve that problem? You set a minimum wage law. Currently in latter half of 2020 here, the minimum wage law in the United States is, I believe, $7.25, the federal minimum wage law. In most professions and jobs, if you work for an hourly wage, you have to be paid $7.25 an hour. In Ohio, I believe it is higher because states can set their own minimum wage laws, and I believe it's $8.50 an hour, or maybe it's $8.70 an hour. You can check on that on your own and see if that's changed. Moving on, continuing, what is an average workday today in the United States? It's 8 hours per day, 40 hours per week. And if you work over 40 hours, you get paid, you're entitled to overtime pay. If you work more than 60 hours a week, you get double overtime, which is twice your regular wage. 3 examples of jobs worked by children in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So we would have the breaker boys, worked in coal mines. Very dangerous, very dirty, not just from a physical standpoint, but from a medical standpoint, I guess, as well. The same thing. But medical standpoint, they're not just getting hurt maybe by the machines and the physicality of the labor, but they're also breathing in coal dust constantly during the day. Newsies, kids who would stand in the corner of streets and sell newspapers. Also dangerous because they could become a target for criminals who maybe seeing them sell stuff throughout the day want to take their earnings. Textile mills, mill girls, very dangerous, lots of moving machines. Kids very young required to work with these moving machines and also breathing in cotton and different material and dust all day, not good for the lungs. Shoe shine boys, very dangerous, similar to the newsies, working in the same place all day, could become a target for criminals. And farming job, field hands. Kids have been working in those positions for a very long time, even before the late 1800s, early 1900s, and it's farming, it's naturally dangerous whether you have mechanized or unmechanized machines. Last thing, historical process. What does the word credible mean? Credible means trustworthy, reliable, believable, consistent, accurate. If a source is credible, it is all these things it needs to be, it can be relied upon. What is a thesis? A thesis is the argument you are trying to prove in an essay. Usually comes at the end of the introductory paragraph. It's like your keyhole statement. It's what you lay out what you're going to discuss in this essay. Question number 3 and the last one. What is the difference between a primary and a secondary source? Primary sources come from a first-hand account. A diary, a journal entry, a photograph. These are all first-hand accounts. A secondary source comes from somebody who is writing about an event or person, place, or thing well after the fact. So a professor writing a book about World War I in the 2020s would be writing, it would become a secondary source. He may use primary sources to consult them and use them for his writing, but his writing itself is a secondary source. Okay, that is the review sheet. If you have any more questions about the first quarterly, email me, Chris Miller at zanesville.k12.oh.us, and I will be glad to help you. Good luck, guys.